Global Affairs major of Mahidol University International College, is proud to host the first event of the semester on Finland's foreign policy and European security. I'm pleased to warmly welcome and would like to thank our honored guest, His Excellency Jyri, along with the officials from the Finnish Embassy for graciously taking the time to be here with us today. It's a pleasure to have you. I would also like to thank the Social Science Division for their help in organizing this event, making it all possible. Thank you to all participants for attending. We hope that it is both engaging and informative. This is an embellishing opportunity to gain perspective and insight into the nuances that surround European security. His Excellency, our guest speaker, received his master's degree in economics and has studied international relations in the United States and political science in Europe. He is currently the ambassador of Finland to Thailand, as well as ambassador designate to Cambodia. His Excellency has also served as director of the personnel unit in the ministry and held various positions in the department for the U.S. and Asia. To start off, it's my honor to welcome Social Science Division Chair, Assistant Professor William J. Jones, up to the podium for some opening remarks. Everyone, please give a big round of applause.
Students and staff for the first event of the trimester. It is also an honor to host His Excellency Jyri, Järviaho, Ambassador of Finland here to MUIC. The International Relations and Global Affairs major strives to provide its students with quality education inside and outside of the classroom. I believe this event is a prime example of this practice. The war in eastern Ukraine, which began on February 24th, 2022, and continues to present, has upended the post-Cold War order of relations in Europe and further abroad. Some effects of the war can be observed. Are severe disruptions to energy markets, essential food supplies, mass refugee flows, and environmental effects, just to name a few. While the effects of the war will not fully be known for many years to come, one major outcome of the war is the expansion of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The heretofore neutral country of Finland applied for and was formally accepted into NATO on April 4, 2003. The expansion of NATO to include its 31st member was hailed by the Finnish President Sauli Niinisto as a great neighbor of Finland, further stating that Finland would be a reliable ally, and this membership would not be a threat to anyone. With this in mind, it is with great pleasure to have Finland's ambassador with us today and to provide insight into his country's foreign policy shift and possible wider effects of the war in eastern Ukraine. Your Excellency, I welcome you to MUIC and look forward with great anticipation to the talk. Thank you, everyone. I hope you find today's talk insightful and original. Please, a warm welcome to our honored guest.
Thank you very much for your insightful remarks. Now I would like to welcome His Excellency Jyri up onto the stage for his thoughts on Finland's NATO membership. Everyone, please give a warm welcome and big round of applause.
Thank you first of all so much for inviting me this morning to here to talk about Finnish foreign security policy in these crucial times. It's a great pleasure for me to be here discussing with all of you and see that so many people are interested in our issues in Europe. So it's a really great pleasure, and despite that we had very exciting elections as well yesterday. So congratulations so far for the elections. Hopefully everything goes smoothly ahead with the results, and people will be respected hopefully. obviously in Finland we had elections since we became independent, and even before that, Finland was actually was the first country to give voting and candidacy rights to women in 1906. So we have quite a good and long tradition of democracy and elections in Finland as well. But certainly today we talk more about the security situation in Europe and Russian aggression in Ukraine and all the ramifications on this issue. First of all, of course, I'd like to say just a few words about Finland. So Finland is a kind of a smallish country in the northeast corner of Europe. We are bordering Russia. We have a 1,300 kilometer border with Russia, so we are used to dealing with Russians in many different times, in different ways, including having war with them. We have 5.5 million inhabitants. Our GDP is 237 billion, $47,000 per person, which is quite high. We speak mainly Finnish. We have a Swedish-speaking minority, and then another minority language is Sami, which is spoken in the northern Finland only. A very quite small number of people left Sami. Sort of initial people live in the northern part of Finland, Sweden, Norway, as well as Russia. Other languages, of course, spoken in Finland are Russian, Estonian, Arabic, and English. We are mainly Lutheran church, Christian Lutheran. We have Orthodox church as well in Finland, and then other churches like that. 87% of us hold an upper secondary education degree, and 42% hold a higher education degree, and 100% literacy. So probably you have heard at some point that Finland has a reasonably good education system, and which is based on equality, equal education for all in Finland, and it's cost-free. Basically, since the kindergarten until university, everything is free. So if you manage to go through the school system, you might end up anywhere, like myself. Then maybe just go a little bit brief into our history. We were under Swedish rule between 1200 and 1900s, few hundred years. Of course, at those times, there was no discussion or thought even of a nationhood of Finns. Even though we were different from the Swedish, we were different from the Russians, we spoke different language, but the nationality idea grew mainly in the 1900s, between the times of when we were under Russian control, in 1809 and 1917. We were kind of a grand duchy of Russia, had more, let's say, independence than many other parts of Russia. Also developed our parliamentary system during those times. So, and the idea of Finland being an independent nation grew on those times. We declared independence in 1917 in the aftermath of Russian Revolution. That was a quite crucial point in our history, obviously. And Russia, actually the Bolsheviks acknowledged our independence at the end of the year 1917. So, and since then, all the rest of the countries in the world started acknowledging our independence. So that was quite important moment. Then, actually, what is missing here, we had a short-lived 3-month civil war in 1918 between different groups in Finland, whether to set up a republic or something else, and the Republican forces won, and we set up a democratic republic in Finland. Then we approached, of course, the very difficult times in Europe, as you know from the history of the Second World War. And what happened in 1939 was that Russia and Germany agreed. First of all, they agreed that they will not attack each other. which was totally lied from both sides. They knew it, but nevertheless they agreed on it, and they secretly divided Europe amongst themselves. So, and in this secret protocol, Finland was to be under the Soviet rule or influence. And because of that, the Soviet troops attacked Finland in November 1939, and actually in a very harsh winter conditions. During that winter, sometimes it was minus 40 degrees, so the Russians were actually in very deep trouble with the cold weather, also the Finns, but at least we knew how to deal with the cold weather a little better. So we were able to defend ourselves, and then there was a short-lived peace agreement in Soviet Finland. And later what happened was that in a way we joined German plans of the war, and some German troops came to Finland, in northern Finland especially, and then we had a so-called continuation war with the Soviet Union from 41 to 44 for several years. So those were very harsh war years for Finland, obviously for the whole Europe at that time. What happened at the end of the war was that Stalin saw that they were advancing towards Finland and were gaining, but he had more rush towards Berlin, so he needed all the troops in Berlin. So he made a peace deal with Finland, and according to this peace deal, Finland was supposed to get rid of the German troops in Finland, and that's what happened. So we had a peace deal at Fort Hall with the Soviet Union, and then we had a short-lived war with the German troops at the northern Finland, and we pushed the Germans out from the north. So then it took some years, over 10 years, when Finland was able to join the United Nations in 1955. And of course, during that time, we were not part of any military alliances. We tried to stay as neutral as we possibly could in those times. And we understood that if the Soviet Union would have liked to take Finland over, perhaps no one would have come to help. That was our assessment of the situation at that time. So our presidents, Paasikivi just after the war, and then following him, President Kekkonen, they thought it's so important to keep good relations with the Soviet Union and maximize then the way we can deal with the West. But obviously we were not able to join any alliances, not even the European Economic Area, which is the president of the European Union. So we stayed neutral and non-aligned for quite some time. And then in 1991, Soviet Union collapsed. And then at that point, we saw our chances to start focusing on which way to join. And obviously, we wanted to join the European Union. And that happened in 1995. There was a referendum in Finland, and of course the majority supported joining the European Union. And it was very clear political. And that time also partly maybe security policy choice for Finland. Join the Western countries and the European Union. We did not join NATO at that point. We didn't even apply. We thought it's better to be militarily non-aligned at that point. And in a way, NATO also promised to keep its doors open for all Eastern or Central European countries that wishes to join. But we opted not to join, and NATO membership was left in our security policy doctrine as an option. As an option if the security situation in Europe would dramatically change, we could use that option. And of course, in the 1990s, we didn't know exactly how the Russian Federation would develop. We had high hopes. At some point, when the Yeltsin was president, there were some aspects of the Russian Federation that showed that maybe democracy somehow would prevail. But unfortunately, after Putin, things have changed, as we now see very dramatically later on. And then in last year, when Russia started its aggression against Ukraine in February, that altered and changed the whole situation obviously for us. And we then decided to apply, first of all, NATO membership, and now we were joined a month ago. During the Cold War years in 1945 until 1995, as I mentioned, we stayed neutral and unaligned in international politics. Nordic cooperation in that time was extremely important for us, and it developed quite nicely actually. Even before the European Union, the Nordic countries had open borders for each other. We could travel freely, we didn't need passports, we could work in each other's countries freely, so there was labor movements as well. A lot of Finns actually moved to Sweden to work there. So the Nordic cooperation was extremely important at that time for Finland. It's a kind of a lifeline for us politically and mentally. Also, Finland saw its place as a neutral country to promote, let's say, international understanding, and at that time it was called the bond between the great powers. There was a lot of talk about nuclear weapons balance between the Soviet bloc and the Western bloc. There was NATO countries, there was Warsaw Pact countries. So Finland proposed kind of cooperation between the great powers and all of the European countries. And in 1975, a Helsinki Final Act was agreed with the European countries and US. Canada also participated. And finally, this led to the creation of the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Still quite important organization, even though the cooperation with Russia, of course, is totally very, very difficult at this point. There were other organizations in Europe that we could only join later, and the Council of Europe is one of them. It's mainly concentrating on human rights and democracy issues. So we joined the Council of Europe in 1989. And then, as I mentioned, Soviet Union collapsed in 1995, and this was the end of, from our point of view, Finnish neutrality policy. We joined the European Union. We were not neutral anymore. We were militarily non-aligned, but not neutral. We were part of the West, clearly. During 1949 and 1992, we actually had an agreement on friendship, cooperation, and mutual assistance between Finland and Soviet Union. This was required by Soviet Union. One of the things that was agreed on that agreement was that Finland advised to secure its borders, that no one would attack Russia through Finland. This was important for Russia, and actually Soviet Union earlier demanded in the beginning that if there's a threat through Finland, they would send troops to Finland according to the agreement, but Finland never agreed on that. So we only agreed that we will defend our own territory, and that's it. And this was, of course, important doctrine, as I mentioned, Paasikivi, our presidents, two former presidents, Paasikivi and Kekkonen doctrine, that we need to have a friendly relations with the Soviet Union, and then when we have those, they will trust us, and we can work with the West as much as possible. And obviously, Finland relied on diplomacy on those times, and reliable defense forces. What we learned from the Second World War was that we cannot beat Soviet Union or Russia. It's just too big for us. It's just too big, too powerful. We are too small. We have 5.5 million people in Finland. But what we can do credibly is to create a credible military force defending our own territory, and if somebody would attack, it would be very, very costly for them. So that was the idea. And we, since we didn't belong to any alliances, we of course created quite a strong military force service. For example, we have quite modern equipment. We bought F-18 fighter jets in 1994, and just over a year ago we made a decision to buy F-35 fighter jets from the US. So we have quite strong, let's say, air force, and one of the strongest, probably, artillery forces in Europe. We have at the moment. And our army is still compulsory for all the Finns. I have gone through the army service. So in a wartime situation, we are counting that we probably have 280,000 men working for the army, in army service. So that's quite sizable, of course, in these days anyway. But nevertheless, not big enough for competing with Russia. 4th of April, we were able to join NATO finally after all the ratifications of all NATO member states, including Turkey and Hungary, which were the last ones, obviously. And there you can see that we are in the northeast corner of NATO bordering Russia, so it's doubled, I think, the NATO border with Russia. And actually, St. Petersburg, which is the second largest town, city in Russia, is just 200 kilometers from our eastern border. So it's very close. And obviously, the Baltic states joined up earlier already. They're very small. So I think this will increase the security of the whole Northern Europe. That's our assessment of the situation. And we are expecting, of course, Sweden as well to join in due course to NATO as well. So then all the Nordic countries, all the Baltic countries will be in NATO after that. And that will ease the let's say, military planning and exercising and everything within the North. And it will increase the Northern Europe's security in this situation. Finland and Sweden are both security providers. We have different defense forces, very compatible with NATO and each other, so we can operate easily with all of us. And we have to remember that NATO as well is a defense alliance. It's not attacking anyone. It's not threatening anyone. That's how we see. And Finland is certainly not threatening anyone anywhere. The reasons are quite obvious. Joining the NATO was an option left in our security policy doctrine. So this was the time to rethink our alliances when Russia illegally waged the war against Ukraine. We saw that Russia was willing and able to launch its military force towards a peaceful neighboring country. There was also quite loose talk on using nuclear weapons as well. This was quite threatening. Obviously, the United Nations Charter, international law, as well as the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine were violated harshly. The trust on Russian leadership and between the nations was totally lost. Very hard to see in the near future how we will build the trust again. That will be very, very difficult in the years to come. And of course, adding to the problems, atrocities the Russian troops have committed in Ukraine, alleged war crimes and so forth, make Finns even more look into joining alliances. Before the Russian attack, the NATO popular support in Finland was like 25% population, maybe 27%, depending a little bit on the year. It grew immediately after the Russian attack to 60% and then to 70%, and it's now 80% support for NATO membership at this point. So very, very dramatic change according amongst the Finnish population. And of course, as we see it, and hopefully everyone else as well, NATO is a defense alliance. Not planning to attack, it's planning to defend the NATO territory. It protects its members and does not threaten any country or region, not Russia either. We think that Finland's accession will increase the stability also, and the security in Northern Europe, and when Sweden joins, this will be even stronger. Basically the Baltic Sea, which is in between now, will be more or less almost like a NATO sea. So for the surveillance, for the security of this region, will be crucial. We can plan together all the actions and so forth. Finland has been for a long time already, 20 years, kind of a close partner for NATO. And what this has meant is that even our military troops, we have had a lot of exercises with NATO troops, and our whole structure of military is compatible with the NATO structures. So we are ready in that sense. We are completely compatible with the NATO troops. And obviously, we were defending ourselves before joining the NATO, so we will bring quite a lot of strength, military strength as well, to the NATO Northern Europe posture. Also, Sweden hopefully joins soon, since Sweden and Finland have been extremely close in defense cooperation and military cooperation for a long time. Our closest partner, obviously, is Sweden. With other Nordic countries as well, Norway, Denmark, we are very close, and we're now establishing kind of a Nordic NATO cooperation, and hopefully when Sweden joins, and that will increase our interaction in defense matters. Our foreign security policy, of course, does not change that much. Our core values will stay the same. Democratic values, especially human rights-based foreign policy, remain the same. Of course, our defense policies, some alterations will be there. We will still be a member of the European Union, of course, and that will be the most important political sort of community where we belong to. NATO is a military alliance, a little bit different perspective, and the European Union is coordinating foreign policy issues as well, and internal, of course, policies of European issues. And of course, as already mentioned in the beginning, European security has been altered quite dramatically after Russian aggression in Ukraine. Many things have changed, and hard to see how we could come back anymore to the position where we were before Russian attack. these are fundamental changes in European security issues. We know that the humanitarian situation in Ukraine is very difficult. There are 8 million Ukrainian refugees abroad. Also, Finland has taken Ukrainian refugees. I think Poland probably has the most of the refugees, maybe 2-3 million even, but they are spread out in the rest of the European countries as well. And then, of course, a lot of internally displaced people in Ukraine, a lot of destroyed infrastructure, including energy infrastructure in Ukraine. Massive material damages will be very costly and long-term work to reconstruct Ukraine after the war. And obviously, of course, militarily, several thousand or 350,000 at least Russian-Ukraine troops, soldiers have been killed or injured in the war. So it's a massive war. EU has set up sanctions on Russia. I think recently 11th sanction package was announced. So many issues Europe is looking into, of course, starting from the individuals and the leadership in Russia, then going to exports of high-end technologies for the energy sector, especially the military sector, oil and energy refineries, equipment, aviation, space industries, maritime navigation, so forth. So in many spheres and sectors, Europe is not exporting and not letting any exports go to Russia, to Europe. Imports of oil and oil products were cut off end of last year and beginning of this year. Coal, steel, gold, cement, asphalt, wood, paper, rubber, and so forth. Many items that we used to buy from Russia. Finland also used to buy quite a lot of oil, especially, and wood. So these are cut off from the trade. We have to find alternative sources for that. And then price cap for Russian crude oil is set up at $60 per barrel. And of course, there's an aviation ban which affects, for instance, Finnair, the Finnish air company. They used to fly all this through Russian airspace to Asia. They had a lot of excellent routes. Now they have to go around basically through the Middle East, Turkey, and then they fly to India and so forth. So many issues coming up on the sanctions. But food items or fertilizers are not sanctioned at all. So any food items or grain or fertilizers that go from Ukraine or Russia to the world is totally let through by the European Union. Of course, we are all in Europe supporting humanitarian refugees, first of all. Of course, that's our duty when they come to our countries. We have political support for Ukraine, we have humanitarian, financial support from the European countries and European Union, and including military aid from the EU and its member states. I think Germany was the last one announcing 3 billion euros military aid to Ukraine just a few days ago. So those things are so important. Europe has committed itself, including Finland, to support Ukraine as long as it takes. So that's a meaning that when the Ukrainians are ready, when they start negotiating peace, we will support the peace efforts for this. But as long as they are ready to find, we will support this effort. Obviously, of course, NATO countries are coordinating as well on the military assistance. US being, of course, the largest military supporter of Ukraine and so important in many ways, of course. Okay, I think that was my last slide. So that was, I think, my presentation, what I wanted to say this morning, but certainly open for questions and any comments or anything you may have. Let's go to discussion part. Thank you.
Now we will proceed with the Q&A session, and I would like to invite our moderator, Associate Professor Dr. Douglas Ryan, up onto the stage to join His Excellency.
First of all, thank you. This was an interesting presentation, and I know it's quite a while to drive out and spend time with us, so I want to just thank you again for agreeing to participate in the event today. Listening to the presentation, I found it very interesting about the history, in particular the expansion of NATO, and I'm curious, what do you think will be the impact on Finland in terms of the Russian response? Many have argued that the expansion of NATO is merely poking the bear. I'm curious about your opinion on this.
Thank you. And obviously we have been thinking about that. But our assessment is that obviously there might be and will be some response from Russia. And so far, it's been much milder than what we expected. And understandably, Russia is now busy in Ukraine because so many other issues. So they are a little bit downplaying the membership of Finland and Sweden in NATO. I think that's my assessment of this. But obviously, it's clear that they will respond in one way or the other. They will probably, after they finish the war in Ukraine, they will settle maybe some forces, some military bases around the area, surveillance and so forth. So there will be some. We expected more so far, but nothing major happened. There have been some cyber attacks and issues like that, which we expected as well. Those might continue, but we are quite good in responding to all those possible threats. So I think yes, they will respond in one way or the other, but they will not attack a NATO country. This is my idea. They will not attack the NATO country. I don't think they fully understand the power and strength of the NATO alliance and Article 5 in NATO, which is the common defense of all countries.
Interesting. With assuming the elections in Turkey go well and Sweden is admitted to NATO as well, do you see this as having any socio-cultural impact on the country?
In our countries, it is a change in the way we have been thinking. So it is quite a big change in people's mind, I think. We have a long history of military non-alignment, and now we are joining military alliance. So it makes a difference in people's mind. But nevertheless, as I mentioned, NATO support in Finland is quite high. It's around 80% at the moment. It used to be quite low. So it's flipped totally on the Russian, after the Russian aggression. So there will be a change in our mentality maybe a little bit. But on the other hand, once we get used to NATO and we continue our let's say, foreign security policy that we continued so far, maybe not so big changes will be visible after all.
Interesting. I would just see it as a paradigm shift from non-alignment to a NATO member state would have repercussions on how people approach foreign policy and other issues as well.
Sure. But let's say all the NATO countries already, like Norway, Denmark, they've had for a long time their foreign policies. Norway has been maybe one of the main peace promoters in the world, negotiating peace agreements in the Middle East and elsewhere quite actively. So I don't think, maybe it makes a little bit difference, especially from the Russian perspective. They don't see us anymore. It's clear. But on the other hand, our foreign policies are not changing that much, especially if we consider other parts of the world. Obviously, for Russians, it makes a difference, it makes a huge difference. But for the rest of the world, maybe not so much.
Thank you. I'm sure some of you out there have questions as well, so I'd like to open it up to the audience. Thank you.
Did the dynamic relationship between Finland and Russia deteriorate after Finland joined NATO?
Yes, it did. And it did already since the Russian attack last year. And of course, obviously, we joined the European Union sanctions on Russia, first of all. We condemned Russia and all these United Nations resolutions and elsewhere. We were supporting Ukraine militarily, humanitarian affairs, politically. So obviously it made a difference in our relations. Russia didn't like that, and they listed us, as the rest of the European Union countries, as non-friendly countries. So we are a non-friendly country with Russia from their perspective. And obviously the cooperation has changed dramatically. We had a lot of Finnish companies, for instance, in Russia operating. They had production facilities, and they had shops, and this and that in Russia. But most of the Finnish companies had already left, or they are trying to leave the Russian markets. This has been a very dramatic change in economic terms as well. Because we had quite a lot of cooperation in economic terms, especially the border trade as well with Russia. There were a lot of Russian tourists coming to Finland. This doesn't happen anymore. The trade has been halted almost completely. There is still the trade with some items, but the main items like oil, wood, and such items, and energy, even we bought electricity from Russia. We're not doing that anymore. So yes, it has affected a lot in our relations with Russia. In fact, we had consulate in Murmansk. We temporarily closed it down now, since there's no activities there. We had another consulate near Finnish border in town called Petrosavush, which was closed as well. So at the moment we have, of course, our embassy in Moscow, and then we have our consulate general in St. Petersburg. So yes, there's been a lot of effects on our relations, and they will be long term.
Thank you.
So from the presentation, it said that €1 billion was used to support the Ukraine. What was the reaction of the taxpayer in the country?
I think Finnish taxpayers fully understand and they support our efforts to support Ukraine. They fully understand that we are next to Russia. So whatever happens in Ukraine will be crucial for us as a country next to Russia. So there was never a question about that. All political parties support fully the Ukraine support. This is a big amount of money for Finnish taxpayers, actually, over €1 billion. So not a small amount. And we never used to export arms to conflict areas before this war. So, but this has changed also that concept totally. So now we're exporting arms to Ukraine worth of 750 million, I think, at this point. And it will increase as we go along. And obviously the humanitarian support as well is large. And we are already preparing mentally ourselves to reconstruction of Ukraine. That will be expensive as well. But I think we are all ready for that.
Thank you.
Hi, Ambassador, thank you for your talk, very interesting. now that you are part of NATO, of course we understand the inheritance that drove Finland to join NATO. And could I ask you to maybe look forward a bit beyond Russia-Ukraine? Yes, NATO is a defensive alliance, but NATO has in the last 30 years shown a willingness to go way beyond Europe. So parts of Africa, Afghanistan, and so on. And now NATO has opened up a liaison office in Japan. So how do you and the Finns feel about forward projection, power projection here in East Asia? When it comes to things like Taiwan, South China Sea, do you put Finns, with the Finnish people, Finnish foreign policy, well, okay, go ahead. I'll leave it there.
Sure, that's a good question. Of course, from our perspective, NATO is mainly European-based organization. Obviously, Canada, US being part of it makes it a little bit larger than that. And yes, we have been participating in NATO-led operations in Afghanistan, for instance. Maybe not in Africa, but in Afghanistan certainly. So yes, we fully understand that it might do some crisis management operations abroad and anywhere if so decided and if the mandate is valid from the United Nations and so forth. So that makes a difference. But I think we are still probably, I'm not an expert on NATO, but I think we're still a little bit far from NATO expanding to Asia. Of course, they may have a liaison office in Japan, which is important in itself, to have a good contact with Japanese colleagues and to share their views on developments, especially in Ukraine at the moment. But on Taiwan issue, I haven't heard discussions, at least. I'm not aware if NATO as an alliance would be stepping up on those issues. I might be wrong, I'm not an expert, but that's my basically what I thought. Of course, NATO itself is developing all the time. Now that new countries are joining, it's changing as well NATO. The situation is different. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, for a while we thought we don't need NATO anymore. There was some discussion on the issue, whether it's what would it do, because the Warsaw Pact that was the adversary on the Soviet side collapsed, Soviet Union collapsed. What was the purpose of NATO after that? But now we realize that actually at this point we need NATO more than ever. It will be so important for the European security at this point, I think. But reaching out to Asia and starting thinking about the Asian security issues through NATO, I think we are still a little bit not ready for that. I don't know if the discussion goes forward in NATO in some circles. That's my answer.
Thank you.
So I would like to ask about the economic impact that the Russia-Ukraine war brought to Finland, in terms of, for example, like Finland spending, in terms of trade, and in terms of energy prices and the cost of living prices during the last years, the events of last year. And does Finland's decision to join NATO and deciding against Russia have any impact not only just for Russia but other Russian allied countries like Belarus or China?
Thank you very much. Indeed, I think the situation has affected the Finnish economy quite drastically. Obviously, we had this, as I mentioned, we had a lot of trade with Russia. That's collapsed, and the Finnish companies that invested in Russia are leaving or left already. And by the way, there was a Fortum, Finnish energy company, invested quite a lot in Russia, maybe 15 or 20 power stations around Russia. And now Russia nationalized the property, so they don't get a penny for the moment. Of course, they will be claiming that later on. But nevertheless, it has quite a big impact in some sense in the Finnish economy and the world economy as well. As you mentioned, the energy prices went up quite drastically in the beginning of the conflict. They've gone down now. But nevertheless, whole Europe had to think the energy totally different way. Not only Finland, but whole Europe. Since there was a lot of dependency on Russian energy, especially oil and gas. Finland also bought oil and gas from Russia. We are not buying oil anymore from Russia. And fortunately, there are alternative sources in the world for oil. You can bring them in with tankers and so forth. We also bought some gas from Russia. That's cut off by Russians. But we rented LNG terminal from the US, so we have LNG gas available enough for Finnish and Estonian purposes. So we had a, of course, difficult time in thinking what to do now, but fortunately, we have quite a good mix on energy issues. We have nuclear power, we have a common Nordic electricity network grid. If one country is missing something, other countries can provide and so forth. On the economic side, our imports from Russia were around 10% of our imports, but they were mainly energy products. And of course, we are now substituting them from other sources. Our exports to Russia were maybe 5% of our exports in general, and we are now in the process of looking at alternative markets, including Thailand and Southeast Asia. So hopefully that brings some new markets for our companies. But definitely increasing food prices, increasing energy prices, about inflation to Finland, but the whole Europe, also the US. Now the interest rates have started going up, and obviously it's slowing down the whole economy in Europe. And by the way, that will have an impact on Thai exports as well, since European markets and US markets are quite important for Thai exporters. So slowing down markets in Europe and in the US will have an impact on Thai export companies, definitely. So it has a worldwide implications, and of course energy prices in China as well have gone up somewhat. But I think the inflation has been much worse in Europe and the US than here.
You mentioned the Russian government seizing Finnish assets. Has there been any discussion of reciprocity and perhaps the Finnish government seizing Russian assets and closing bank accounts of prominent Russian financiers?
Indeed, there was earlier already when the aggression started last year. Quite soon after that, assets of the Russian oligarchs that are supporting the leadership were seized in the Western banks. So they are there in the banks, and there's quite a lot of them. In Finland, I don't think we have Russian property, if we don't consider a couple of companies, but they're quite small. So probably we will not reciprocate that way. We will try to challenge them in the international courts, hopefully, on that account.
Thank you.
Hello. So, from what I know, one of the main reasons that Ukraine got attacked was them trying to join NATO, and Ukraine is basically right at the border of Russia. So, your eastern border of Finland is right next to Russia, and from you joining NATO, do you feel any threat from Russia, like of being attacked in the future?
Yeah, there's a difference because we are now a member of the NATO, so we are under the Article 5 in NATO, which means common defense, collective defense. In that sense, I think we are now more secure. Of course, we are thinking during the application process, maybe Russia could have done something. But obviously we had some security guarantees from individual NATO member countries like UK, US, Germany and so forth. So I think there was no real threat in that sense. But you're right, this was the claim the Russians put forward when they attacked Ukraine, that they don't want NATO in their borders. It's true. But I think the reason itself is not valid because, of course, Ukraine had applied NATO membership already in 2008, and NATO were considering it, but it was not to be achieved anytime soon. But actually what will happen now, it will be more interesting, because now the EU and the NATO countries have been supporting so much Ukraine during this war that I would be surprised if they would not become NATO member after the war. So I think this would have adverse effect what Russia started talking in the beginning. I think Ukraine, first of all, will join the European Union, but I think also there's a high possibility it will join NATO after the war. They have proven their stance on the issue very clearly to all of us, and they're very courageous fighting Russian forces. So they're losing so many people, including civilians, children, women, everybody, and obviously soldiers. So they have proven their point. If they can defend Russia that way, they should be able to join the NATO treaty organization as well. That's what I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, sort of two questions kind of looking towards the future. Do you foresee any major NATO infrastructure, sort of, you can see like in Poland or Romania, American military bases, installations, etc., ever being sort of established on Finnish territory, and how that might affect its position? And number two, you mentioned the nature of Russian relations now with Europe. Do you foresee this ever being mended within the near future? Or is this a similar kind of permanent rupture?
Thank you. Yes, let's say the permanent military structures within any of the NATO member countries' territory is voluntary, I think, by the member countries. And obviously, we understand that countries on the Eastern Front, especially the Baltic states, but including Poland, they have requested this from the NATO countries. And I think especially the Baltic countries, they really need it. They're small countries, the military is very small. They really need some structures, NATO structures in their territories. But Finland, on the other hand, we've had a long time quite capable military force, and we were capable of defending our territory. So we have prepared ourselves on this issue, and we don't see immediate need for any, let's say, permanent structures of NATO within our territories. We can defend ourselves, and if we need help, we can ask it. But obviously, I think the training with NATO troops will increase. We are now discussing with the US a bilateral agreement on procurement issues. There might be some issues that maybe they want to store some of the ammunition or something like that in the Finnish territory. But so far there hasn't been any talk on military bases in Finland. I don't think we are demanding that either. think we don't need it for the moment. If the situation dramatically changes somehow, maybe then we have to consider. And by the way, in the Finnish law, the nuclear weapons are forbidden from the Finnish territory. So there will not be any nuclear weapons, especially in Finnish territory, in any case. But obviously, throughout the years of being a partner to NATO, partnership to peace, we've had a lot of exercises with NATO troops within the Finnish territory, but also outside in the northern parts of Europe. Our troops have participated in Iceland and Norway exercises, in Sweden and everywhere. So, but also the exercises have been held in the Finnish territory. So I think those ones, of course, we will be having. So there will be some NATO troops coming and going, but not permanent. I think so for the moment. Another question.
This question was on the possibility of mending relations with the Russians, or is this kind of a semi-permanent kind of freeze?
Yes, in the hard to say what happens in the longer perspective. You're right, but in the, let's say, short term of 5 to 10 years, very hard to see the relations between NATO and Russia getting much better. Of course, it depends on developments within Russia itself. So we don't know what happens in Russia in years to come. But if there are radical changes within Russia, the leadership and the policies, maybe will be a lot of options open. But for now, I think there's no chance having much better relations with NATO and Russia for the moment, for the foreseeable future.
A lot of this is based on this presumption of a very strong, unified NATO. Do you see any threats to the current unification of NATO as we see as the whole group of bloc nations working together? Are there any threats on the horizon that may destabilize NATO as we see it today?
Sure. I mean, this conflict this war has put NATO in a totally different position and unified not only NATO but also European Union countries and support Ukraine. So for the moment, I think this is a unifying effect on NATO countries. In a little bit longer term, hard to know what will happen in the NATO. Of course, we have Turkey, a little bit. Sometimes to a little bit different perspectives, as well as Hungary. So, not completely sure how that will play out in the future. And obviously, we had yesterday the elections in Turkey as well for the presidency. So we will have to see what comes out there as well. And of course, all NATO countries have their own policies on defense policies and their alliance policies. So, but for the moment, Ukraine has unified with NATO. But further on, of course, now when Finland and Sweden hopefully join soon, NATO will be already different organization. I think the whole Northern Europe, excluding Russia, will be part of NATO and its military planning. Then we will get the question of the Ukraine after that. So let's see how that comes out in the years to come as well. Will they earn their place in NATO or not? But so far it's been unifying, I think, apart from Turkey.
Your Excellency, I have a proposition to make regarding the switch from being neutral and to joining NATO. And that is that you have made a serious blunder, both in strategic, economic and political terms. I remind you, strategically, You attacked Russia in 1941, believing alongside the Nazis, believing that they were going to win. They didn't. You've now joined NATO, believing that Russia is going to lose in the Ukraine. It isn't. Economically, you talked briefly about some of the trade that you've got with Russia. Maybe that is not as important to you as perhaps your Western trade, but I think one of the consequences long term is that Russia is going to lock you out of the economic markets to the east, with China and further afield. Politically, you joined NATO in the West and the EU at a time when we see the West declining. The de-dollarization that is going on is an indication of that. But at the same time, you see the BRICS increasing in size and influence. Saudi Arabia has just, for example, made a deal with Iran, and we're going to see the petrodollar no longer exist. So long term, I don't see why you've done this. It doesn't make sense long term. You've decided to choose the West against Russia, and everyone should understand that Russia is an indomitable foe, and you should treat it with the utmost respect. I think you are not. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good viewpoint, another perspective that what we have, as you can imagine. Certainly, there are opinions where people see that we should never join any alliances which threaten Russia, as you explained. I understand that completely, but on the other hand, the reason why we joined is Russia itself. It has become a very dangerous country for its surrounding. Attacking Ukraine without no reason whatsoever. That's how we see it, obviously. And I think we, as any country, will try to secure ourselves the best way we can, so we can conduct independently our policies and economic affairs as well. We would not want to be dependent on Russia in any case in this circumstances. No way. I don't think Russia can block our trade to China or anywhere. We have a lot of trade with China, by the way. Obviously, our trade with Russia is impacted. That's clear. We understand it's not good for us, not at all. We would like to have a Russia which is peaceful and growing and democratic, hopefully, and has peaceful relations with all of its neighbors. This would be ideal for us. We would love that. If there would be a country like that, we would never join NATO, but they are not. They are not. They are trying in a totally different direction. And we have to secure our country from that kind of influence and attacks, possibly attacks. So that's our point of view at this point, of course. But I understand that there are other points of view as well.
Thank you. Sorry, in the front.
Thank you for answering that. Just adding on to Mr. Nick's question. In short term, the step of joining NATO does seem reasonable. However, Finland's trading partner, one of the countries that is actively involved in trade, is China. And China has been very actively supporting Russia in terms of trade. And it is also a very prominent nation. And the United States does have very bad relations. I mean, in the past we've seen they don't fancy China so much. In the long term, with such a scenario, doesn't this decision of joining NATO dilute Finland's stance in international affairs and your voice? Because now you are connected to countries which are powerful and they have very funny relationships with each other.
Sure, China certainly is an important point for any considerations of foreign policy and economic policy especially. we had quite a long time, well, over 20 years at least, very deep economic cooperation with China. A lot of Finnish companies invested in China, Chinese markets, and there's quite a lot of trade. Obviously, China is extremely important in international supply chains and so forth. We know US-China rivalry is a big issue here. But first and foremost, we don't see NATO membership affecting that relationship between Finland and China. We are, of course, European Union member. We have been already since 1995. So we will be following European Union policies on China. And I think Europe has had a little bit, maybe a bit more balanced policy towards China than the US. Of course, US is so important for Europe that we understand the basis of US policies in this region as well. But certainly China continues to be a very important economic partner for Europe and for Finland as well. So I don't think NATO membership affects that at all. In some ways, of course, if this conflict further escalates and something starts happening and China starts supporting militarily Ukraine, that could cause quite a big trouble, I think. So there you have a point. But that would not make any difference. We would be an EU country regardless of NATO membership, and we would follow EU policies on those instances. But certainly, there's always a chance of escalation in this kind of dangerous conflicts. Well, I mean, China has policies with Russia. You're right. It's kind of supporting in a way, and of course buying the oil that Europe is not buying, and so forth. Also, by the way, India is buying as well quite a lot of Russian oil. But possibly China, Russia sees China as an alternative trade partner for itself. But for China, I think still, apart from energy, Europe is probably more important than Russia economically. So there's a lot of trade between Europe and China. So China will try to balance these issues. We understand that they, in some way, they support Russia. So far, of course, not militarily, and hopefully not at all. But trade-wise, China is benefiting, I think, from this situation. So they will utilize the benefits definitely. But hopefully it doesn't go in the worst situation.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your views today on everything. Just to reiterate what Ajahn Jay was saying earlier, I think one of the great things about having these events is that we allow students to discuss issues and share ideas, and it's not just theoretical in nature. It gives everyone a chance. So it's one of the great things about the IR program. We're coming up on the end of our time for today's event. So if you're all willing, I'd like everyone to give a hand to His Excellence for coming out.
Thank you everyone for a good round of Q&A. Now I would like to welcome Social Science Division Chair William J. Jones for a gift exchange. Before we mark an end to the first event of the semester, I would like to give a special thank you and express gratitude to His Excellency for an enthralling and insightful discussion on Finland's foreign policy and European security. It was a great opportunity to learn from an accomplished ambassador through a thought-provoking talk. I would also like to thank our honored guests, the ambassadors and diplomatic officers from the Finnish embassy for kindly taking the time to be here with us today at Salaya. It was our absolute pleasure to welcome you. Thank you to our audience. Thank you to everyone for coming. We hope that it was engaging, compelling, and informative. Everyone, please give one last big round of applause to our honored guests.